On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks are 3-up against the Minnesota Timberwolves. I've got the voice of the Mavs, Mark Followill, here to talk about what's the most impressive thing about the Mavs going up 3-0 and what happens if Dereck Lively can't play and Maxi Kleber can. We'll talk about that and more in today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and your best friend covering the Dallas Mavericks at the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen today, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform. Leave us a review, like the video on YouTube, and comment anything below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And joining me, the Mavs play-by-play voice on TV. What you got for me, Mark Followill?
Man, it's great to be on here. You know, as a Mavs podcast co-host of Take That With You, I do readily say this is the #1 Mavs podcast out there. I'm sorry to your listeners and viewers who today are not going to get to hear the witty, wild, creative, and by his own admission, at times unhinged rantings of the great Slightly Biased. But I will do the best I can today.
Did you see our setup yesterday? You said our setup yesterday. We were like literally 10 yards from the TNT guys. It's me and Slightly and Reggie out of Tula, and we're just over there screaming, and those guys are trying to do like a TV broadcast.
Oh man.
Nobody has more fun than us here on Locked On Mavs. We'll talk about,
and that is what sports is supposed to be, man. 100%. It is supposed to 100%. Be fun. Period.
Making it more fun to be a Dallas Mavericks fan every day. Absolutely. What would make it more fun to be a Dallas Mavericks fan right now? And I think I speak for all MFFLs and all fans right now. So we wish you were on the broadcast or had some kind of broadcast. I think we should sponsor some kind of like covert stream where you do the play-by-play, and it's just like we don't have to tell the NBA, like we don't have to tell them that we're doing it, but
just we'll scramble the signal like old-time HBO.
That's right. But yeah, we all wish you were on the broadcast and calling these games, and at least until the conference finals. Like that to me makes sense. Maybe the finals, but yeah, we're
well, I guess the networks don't want our broadcast dunking on theirs, so it is what it is, man. So it's a bummer, but the way that you keep your head screwed on straight about it is to remind yourself that when you're not on, that means that something really special is happening for the team because a deep playoff run is happening. And thrilled for those guys, man, and thrilled for all of our MFFL community that's getting a chance to experience this because, these, past history should inform us how special these times truly are.
It absolutely is. After Game 3, I just started realizing, man, how many times does this really happen in like a sports fan's life? I mean, in certain teams, they've never done it. You think about like our guys that cover the Hornets for Locked On Hornets. They haven't even covered anything close to this right now. And the Mavs have done it now a couple of years. My first question I've been asking everybody, when did you realize this Mavericks team could go to the finals?
Probably after they took a commanding, well, it's not commanding, but at least after they took a 3-2 series lead against Oklahoma City and were coming home for a closeout game. Now, I knew that was going to be a tough game, and it was as difficult as it could possibly be. But the clarity of that possibility really came into focus for me when they were 1-1 away from beating Oklahoma City. It's like, and especially because at that point, I knew obviously had been following the trends and hadn't lost back-to-back games yet in the postseason. So felt pretty good that one way or another they were going to be able to close out that series. And then once you're there playing in the conference finals, then at that point when you're in the Final Four, you damn well better get the why not us vibe and the why not us kind of approach at that point. And so that would be probably the time that it really became real from my perspective.
I think the first time I like thought about it was when I realized Denver was going to be on the opposite bracket. When I realized Denver wasn't going to be there, I was like, all right, they're not going to face him in the first round, second round. Okay, if it's third round, then maybe like this team, things break right. And it's still like, there's still like a glimmer of hope. It wasn't like this full-on belief. I think the same with you. When I realized that they were going to be up and in the Thunder series, It's Denver or Minnesota, and both these teams are kind of going back and forth at each other. We've seen Denver's flaws a couple times when in game 2 against the Timberwolves, where they just looked completely outmatched. It's like, all right, well, maybe the Mavericks can pull one over on them, and maybe they'll be the team that's the team of destiny or something like that. Was there something about this Mavs team? Was it the fact that Kyrie Irving is 14-0 in closeout games? Is that what made you think, hey, this team can pull one over and make it to the finals? Or was there something else that you saw in this team?
I think it's a collective. It's a long list of things. It's Kyrie's leadership. It's Luka's continued ability to play through being, obviously less than 100% and still put up great games. And it's just the change in mentality that has happened in this team, the change in personnel, and consequently the change in mentality and change in DNA and change in approach and all of that's occurred here over the course of the last 1 year plus. All of the additions have made sense. You knew that Kyrie and Luka instantaneously gives them a puncher's chance because those two are so gifted. And now you've got the right puzzle pieces around them. So it's probably roster construction and team makeup more than anything, and just seeing how all the puzzle pieces fit together and how they all provide something that you need at this time of the year to push forward and be in it to win it at the highest level.
There's something about the defensive scheme that Kidd has run the last couple of years here in Dallas that if the pieces are right, it can be really, really good. Now, if the pieces are not right, it looks like last year where the Mavs missed the postseason entirely. But there's something about that. And these pieces fit just right. And we'll talk about Dereck Lively a little bit later, but he has been such a great piece. Obviously, PJ Washington has fit in really well. Derrick Jones Jr. has fit in really well. But there's something about that has just fit so well together that has made this team like it's almost like the sum is better than the individual parts, right? With a scheme like that and the way that these guys have fit together, it's just something special right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's buy-in. I think that's, and I think you talk about scheme, and scheme, of course, is very important. And I look at last year's team, and not only did you not maybe have the right players to execute it and the right pieces, but, it almost seemed like that the players that were there sort of lost belief in what they were doing. And there's belief and buy-in in this group. There are players who are very talented, defensive-minded players. And then the other thing I think that's happening that's such a great tone setter is, as, those of us, all of us are their MFFLs and watching these games closely. I mean, it's happening from the top down. It's Luka and Kyrie, who are extraordinary offensive players who are taking such pride and putting such commitment in on the defensive end of the floor, that there's just a trickle-down effect. I mean, that's inspiring to everybody. I think it brings out the best from the glue guys on the defensive side of the ball, in addition to what they're contributing on the offensive side. So scheme is great, and then it's belief in the scheme and buy-in and, a locker room that is supporting itself, policing itself, and a locker room that the tone is being set from the very best players and right on down the line.
Luka's buy-in on that defense has been insane on certain levels, especially him dealing with the injuries. What have you seen from last year? Being there close, watching every single game, seeing him and the effort that he put in last year, which I thought was lackadaisical a lot of times, to this year to see the difference in buy-in, to see that was maybe a wake-up call last year.
Yeah, well, what happened last year was not fun for him. And I think that is reflected clearly in his demeanor at the end of the year and the things that he said. And then the commitment to conditioning that occurred as soon as the offseason hit. And that commitment to his body, to conditioning, I think has also brought out the best in him defensively, because it allows him to continue to give all that he's giving on the offensive end of the floor, but be in the physical condition and the cardiovascular condition to be able to be a contributor and a participant. I'll use the J-Kid word from the playoff run 2 years ago. As Jason pointed out, the Mavericks of 2011 and that era, and J-Kid got here, of course, at the deadline in 2008, but the Mavericks of that era started to fulfill their potential and, of course, ultimately make that drive to the championship when their best player, Gjorgjievski, realized that, of course, they could design schemes to help him, but he had to be a participant on the defensive end of the floor. And that's something that Jason talked about going back to that Phoenix series when Phoenix was hunting Luka in pick and roll. Yeah. It's like, we'll come up with things to help him, but he's got to be a participant. And You know, that message obviously has very, very much sunk in this year to go along with the commitment to the conditioning. And, you know, I think you need to see nothing more than repeatedly through games in the regular season and in this playoff run, how fired up Luka gets when he blocks a shot. Or last night, you know, I was recording on Monday night, game 3, you know, he took that charge that Chris Finch challenged, and I don't know why he did, because plain as day, Luka took that charge on that drive by Anthony Edwards. And you know, we saw how passionate and fiery and competitive Luka can be after he hit the shot to win game 2, and the things that he said to Rudy Gobert, but you saw that same passion and fire and competitiveness and intensity when, you know, he made a play like drawing that charge in game 3.
He's bringing it. He's bringing it no matter what. And he's also been one of the big reasons why the Mavericks are up 3-0. So let's talk about what's the most impressive thing about this team being up 3-0. We'll talk about that coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has everything that you need to get in on the action on sports. Bets, parlays, lines, spreads, money line, all that kind of stuff. Go check out Mavs Game 4. Mavs 2-point favorite at home. They're not even getting the full 3 again, which I do find kind of interesting there. So you've got that for the game. The conference odds, though, so far for the series. Mavs are minus 3,500. The Timberwolves are plus 1,400 on that one. The Celtics are minus 50,000. The game is going on right now as we're doing this, but minus 50,000 is insane there for that. But if you want to get on the action, all you have to do is put down $5 and you can win. And you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. Visit FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking in on the show. You like that? Take that with you, right? I use that all the time, but I decided I needed to use it. I needed to use it because Mark Followill, Mavs play-by-play, and the co-host of the Take That With You podcast with Brian Damaris. We're talking about this series. Mavs up 3-0. Feels good. It was a good feeling on game 3. Oh, my gosh. The vibes after were amazing. Dare I say immaculate? I feel like I can't say vibes are immaculate anymore since Jalen Brunson is gone. I had to retire the drop. I had a whole drop with it, but the vibes do feel that way. What's been the most impressive thing to you about the Mavs going up 3-0?
That they have out-executed and outperformed Minnesota in clutch time in all 3 games. I mean, Minnesota has led late in clutch time in all 3 games. Now, they barely led in clutch time of game 3, but they did have a 104-102 lead entering the final 5 minutes before Dallas tied up the game and then ultimately took the lead for good of the PJ Washington 3 with 3:38 left in the game. But, you know, Minnesota had, I think, maybe an 82% win probability with their lead that they had late in game 1. They were up by 4 with under 4 minutes to go. They were up by 5 with 1:29 to go in game 2. The win probability that I saw in Unpredictable at that point was, I think it was 93.7 or something along those lines, 93.3, somewhere around in there. So the fact that the Mavericks have been able to perform far better, and most of that, of course, is Luka and Kyrie outperforming Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. But then I would also say that in games 1 and 3, man, PJ Washington Jr. is the player who hit the shot that gave them the lead for good. And of course, Luka and Kyrie are drawing attention, and then they're making the right basketball play. And then PJ is stepping up with that opportunity and making those shots. And Minnesota role players have played well, but you couple Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns struggling, and then those role players get to late game situations and they've kind of cracked a little bit. Kyle Anderson finally missed a shot once they got into clutch time last night. Mike Conley missed 2 shots. One of them was blocked by Daniel Gafford, but you get my point. He missed a couple of shots. Both of those guys after they'd had really good games. Jaden McDaniels has missed some shots in late game situations after he's had good performances. So to me, it's the fact that these games have been coin flips entering the final 5 minutes. And the Mavericks aren't winning it, though, by just pure luck of a coin flip. Their offensive execution, their defensive game plan. And I have to say, Nick, I think that their experience of being here, enough key components, and Kyrie Irving's been in 3 conference finals and 3 NBA finals. And now 4 conference finals. This is the second time for Luka. Green and Derrick Jones Jr. have a little bit of experience. And I think that to some degree, who knows what the percentage is, but I think that is mattering in these late game situations where Dallas is significantly outperforming Minnesota and consequently up 3-0 because of it.
There's something about the young guys too, Lively and Hardy especially, that are like kind of like, it's almost like they're too young to like realize what this moment is. And some of that is like, I think some of that is playing to their favor too, where it's like, hey, we don't know any different. We're just gonna go out there and play. Like, I don't know if they've thought about, man, I may only make this conference finals or the finals like 2 times in my career. You know, like when you, like, I feel like when a vet starts thinking that way, all of a sudden you start overthinking all the stuff that's happening around, but they have some sort of that, like, you know, like ignorance is bliss about those young guys, especially. So they've got the experience and they've got some of that too, which I think is helping them.
I think that's a good point. And I don't think they're going to overthink it, because I'll point specifically to Kyrie's comments after game 3, when someone asked him about, you know, how he felt about being, you know, 3-0 in the conference finals and what that meant, you know, how close they were to the NBA finals. And he said, I'm not thinking about that. And I'm, you know, where we got to win another game in the series. And I'm not, you know, just that's what's out in front of us, is we have to win another game. And it's not what the series is or what the lead is in the series or anything like that. It's just, we have one more win that we need to secure, and obviously want to do it as quickly as possible. So I think, Kyrie's experience, and we saw it all throughout the year. I mean, you're around the team. I mean, there's fiery competitiveness that the team derives from Luka's leadership, but there's stability. And I would almost say it's like Luka's fire and Kyrie is ice. You know, the way this duo leads the team. And there's just, there's a been there, done that. There's maturity, there's calmness, there's willing mentorship. There's a stabilizing presence, because Kyrie is not an up and down sort of guy or anything like that. And I love what he's bringing to this team. And I think he's going to ensure through his demeanor and words and that sort of thing to help keep those young guys to keep their heads in the right places.
It's wild. There's the posts being now like recycled or like regurgitated of when the Nets traded Kyrie to the Mavericks, and like all the Nets fans or Nets accounts or whatever just saying like, hey, good luck with him. Like, hey, he's your problem now. There was that what was the New York Post article that was like something about like your problem now, something like that was like the cover of it. And like to think about that Kyrie and like the mentality or the sentiment that was thought about him when he left, like, oh, now they get to deal with all his stuff, to where Kyrie is now and how we revere Kyrie here in Dallas. About how you just talked about, he's the ice, he's the steady one, he's the one that like keeps everybody calm, keeps them cool. You saw after Luka hit the game, the eventual game winner in game 2, you look and immediately Kyrie goes, one more. He's immediately turns around and is like, we got one more possession because there's 3 seconds left in that game. Like, for him to be that guy shows so much, I think, growth for him, maybe some overreaction on the New York media's part of it, but like, and then the storylines around him, but man, just so much growth. And like, it's awesome to see. He talked about the TNT guys about how he watched the playoffs in 2023 when the Mavs missed, and watched all the leaders and took notes, like sat down and took notes. I cannot repeat that story enough, because I think that it was just so important to think about Kyrie, superstar, $40 million a year guy. Yeah. Has already won a championship, has already hit one of the biggest shots in NBA history, sitting at home with like I imagine like a physical notepad and pencil, like writing down things that he sees, and like humbling himself in that way to get to that moment. And it's all paid off so far. Well,
listen, from the very beginning, I think it's been an organization. I mean, Mark Cuban, you know, still is majority owner, obviously, when they acquired him. And, you know, we've heard what he's had to say. They did a lot less talking and a lot more listening when Kyrie got here. Nico Harrison said it's a risk not to trade for him. Yeah, we have this opportunity, not a risk to trade for him. There's the relationship with Jason Kidd. There's such a high level of respect there. You know, Kyrie grew up in New Jersey when Jason Kidd was starring for the then New Jersey Nets. So, you know, it's a great fit, because this organization needed what Kyrie Irving brought to the table. And I think Kyrie obviously benefits from, you know, the mentality of this organization and this community. I mean, obviously, I love New York and Boston. Those are great cities. I always have a good time there. But obviously, there's difficulties there if you're a high-level professional athlete having to live in that fishbowl and deal with that media environment. There are certainly significant challenges to that. And, you know, I can see why coming here and being here has been just such a breath of fresh air for Kyrie. And, you know, the one thing I guess I would add to all of that is You never understand things wholly and completely until someone is on your team and in your environment. Yeah. And I speak about this from a broadcast standpoint. I mean, you can prep as much as you want for the other teams, but there's only so much you can learn when you're going to see a guy 2 to 4 times a year. But I did feel confident in saying this before Kyrie Irving ever set one foot in Dallas, Texas as a Maverick. And that is, I'd seen enough over the years to know this. Kyrie Irving is amongst his NBA peers an immensely respected player. And that immense respect that he already carried with him has permeated from top to bottom of this locker room. And that's such an important part of where things stand right now.
You mentioned Boston earlier in that. We better be careful about what we say about that city. They might be coming for us soon.
Well, it's over. Matter of fact, I can tell you right now, game over.
No, I got it on my tee up here.
Yeah, sorry, I just spoiled it. I gave you a spoiler then. I'm sorry.
No, I got it up here. They just finished it, and yeah, so Boston's waiting.
Siakam put Indiana up. Man, their series has a lot of similarities to the Mavs Timberwolves series because Indiana had a chance to win 3 games in this series and couldn't get it done late. Siakam put Indiana up 102-98 with 3:33 to go. That's the last time that the Pacers scored. Jason Tatum scored at 3:10. Jaylen Brown tied it at 2:40. And then, there were some turnovers, some missed shots, couple, 2 or 3 turnovers by Indiana. And then, let's see, I'm looking here. A big block by Jaylen Brown on Andrew Nembhard with 105 to go. And then Derek White hit a 3 with 45 seconds left to win it. And that was the last basket, 105-102. And that was the game. And, wow, it ended really weird. I'm just looking at the play-by-play. Maybe you saw it. Jason Tatum missed a 3 with 8 seconds to go. Drew Holiday offensive rebound, and that was the end of the game.
Just a weird.
Last thing I see in the play-by-play on NBA courtside.
What a weird run for the Celtics. We'll have, I guess now, hopefully whenever the Mavs close this out, we'll have a whole bunch of time. John Krause from Locked On Celtics will come on. We'll talk about that. We'll make Porzingis jokes. We'll do all kinds of stuff.
I already saw you retweeting something today, a very, very strange take out of Boston about perspective on the Mavericks. That was bizarre.
They're already trying to couch it already at this point. But
yeah.
All right, coming up, let's talk about Dereck Lively and Maxi. Let's talk about the two of those guys and where we stand with them from practice. We got some reports, and we'll talk about that coming up.
Take that with you.
I doubled up on the Take That With You. All right, Mark Followill, let's talk about the 2 bigs for the Mavericks that are kind of in the injury. They're on the injury report, injury protocols, all that kind of stuff. Dereck Lively is doubtful, and Chris Haynes has reported that he won't play in Game 4. I'm not surprised by that. I think the doubtful was just more to leave the door open for him, but I don't expect Dereck Lively to play in Game 4. Maxi Kleber could return for Game 4. He's now listed as questionable. Let's start with Lively, though. What have you seen from Lively so far in this series, and what does his absence mean for Dallas?
It hurts, dude. I mean, he is a huge part of walling off the paint and making it difficult for Anthony Edwards Minnesota. Oklahoma City was a drive and kick team. Minnesota is a drive and shoot when they get in the paint team. Oklahoma City had one of the highest pass percentages in the league this year on drives to the basket. Minnesota had one of the lowest pass percentages on drives in the NBA this year when they take it inside. So Lively's presence, along with the rest of the Mavericks and their scheme of putting bodies and clogging up the paint and limiting driving lanes, particularly for Anthony Edwards, that's a huge part of the series. And, his defensive presence and obviously the way he can contribute in the vertical game on offense and the lob catches and the offensive rebounds and putbacks and extra possessions earned by that's a loss of significance, no doubt about it.
Yeah, they're a drive and shoot team or a drive and jump over people, as Daniel Gafford found out in Game 3. Oh my gosh, I never heard a crowd react to a play quite like that, where they're like, "That was so cool," but we're upset about it.
Yeah, it happened against us. Yeah,
we're mad about it. Yeah, the missing Lively is going to be tough. I just saw in street clothes Jeff Stotts, who I've seen at many Mavericks games. Great on injuries and all that kind of stuff on Twitter and everywhere. He said that on average, there's not a big sample size of neck sprains or neck strains, but 4 days is the average amount of time. So if we're gonna take that as maybe where Lively could be, Monday would be day 1, 2, 3. So he could miss 4 and a Game 5 if there is a Game 5, and so we'll see by that. But that would mean he's probably going to be available, for the finals if it gets there.
Sure.
So But his absence is going to be tough. Daniel Gafford has to step up in a big way. He stepped up with huge clutch plays at the end of game 3. That block you mentioned on Conley, and then immediately on the other end with the huge alley-oop over Gobert that should have been an and one. That was a massive play. He just has these clutch plays that he comes up with the last couple of days. So Gafford's gonna have to step up. We got a Dwight Powell sighting, and so that's gonna be interesting to see what they do. But the other thing that could help them is Maxi Kleber is now questionable, and I think that's significant that he went straight from out to questionable. They didn't do that. They're not designated him as doubtful, questionable. He was practicing, he was shooting, he was wearing kind of a sleeve. He's been dealing with that shoulder separation, but he could be back. We didn't even see him in the Oklahoma City series. What could Maxi's return mean for the Mavericks?
Well, it's big because it's a return of a big body to the rotation of a big at the precise time you need it. Because if not, then yes, to your point, Gafford's going to have to play more minutes. You also miss Lively on offense because he's a better ball handler and playmaker whenever they blitz the pick and roll. And Lively's the player on the short roll who gets the ball and has it in 4-on-3 situations. He functions better than Gafford does in those particular cases. So Maxi gives you, look, I mean, it was killing me. It was killing me, Smalls, whenever he wasn't available and Naz Reid was going off in game 2. And, Naz Reid quite, nearly single-handedly won that game for Minnesota with his shooting performance. So, they need Kleber. They can use his size. They can play him at the 5. And so, I would suspect you would still see some Powell minutes. I said today on our podcast, I want to embrace the Rick Carlisle lesson of the 2011 Mavericks. We on this team focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be pretty and perfect. You need to go out there and compete and help the team hold down the fort. And I thought Dwight did that last night in a situation where he got immediately thrown in. And I think, he's a obviously very smart guy and is going to be a locked in guy as we talk on Locked On Mavs.
That's right.
But I think it's always difficult when you haven't been in the rotation and then in the middle of the game you get thrown in. So he'll have had 48 hours to kind of hone in on the game plan and specific things tailored for his minutes on the floor. But with Maxi's presence there, and I don't think they would have put him at questionable if the intent wasn't for him to be available. Now, obviously, it will depend on how his body and soreness and everything like that responds from a practice today. Yeah. So we'll see. But I'm certainly optimistic based on reading the tea leaves of what's going on here. But first game back in 3.5 weeks. Conditioning, how well is he going to play? All of that. I mean, especially stepping into a series that's game 4 of the conference finals. I mean, that's very, very challenging. Huge. So I don't know that he can soak up, quite honestly, all of the non-Gafford minutes. So I would suspect, we'll see, but I would assume there's going to be some Powell minutes and maybe, for 1 minute and 29 seconds in the middle of the fourth quarter last night, they went small as well. They played a small lineup. And they did for 34 seconds at the end of the game, but it was a 9-point game then, so I don't think that really matters. But for 1 minute and 29 seconds, they played small. They bought Gafford a little bit of time to rest, and then he came in and played well to close out the game. So that also could be something that we see. Perhaps the presence of Maxi means you don't have to go to that, but I would also say that the game situation will call for it. If you feel like, hey, we need our 5 best guys and the ability to spread the floor, and guys who can. Who are like-sized enough that we can switch in a lot of these pick-and-roll situations, and, they're going to be able to space the floor on offense. Maybe, I think the game will dictate, how they'll have to, answer all of these questions now that a key component looks like, highly likely that Lively won't be there. I assume that there's always still the possibility. You never know with the human body. He's 20 years old. He could wake up tomorrow and feel great. That certainly is possible. So I think that's why, to your point, he's listed as doubtful because there are occasions it does happen, man. Not a lot, because that's why they say it's doubtful. But there are times that players who are listed as doubtful on injury reports do play. Sure. So we'll cross our fingers.
Does happen. Last thing for you. So I mentioned the Kyrie Irving. He's 14-0 in his career. So Cavs and Mavs now in closeout games. So his team has a chance to close it out.
Yeah. Did he have any closeout games? Did he play in the playoffs with the Celtics? I don't even remember now. Or is it just Cavs and Nets?
Well, I don't know if he played a closeout game for the. I remember specifically the Sage game was a playoff game where he was doing the Sage around the court. But I don't know if he had a closeout game for them. Oh, he did have one. He did have one against them because he played 9 games in that year. But do you buy that at all? Like, do you buy the 14-0 from Kyrie? Do you think that's a thing, or do you think that's just like a coincidence stat?
I think it's a thing. I mean, how much? Again, I don't know, but I don't think you can just completely dismiss it as coincidence. Obviously, the teams that he's been on, and clearly for a lot of those games, his teammate was LeBron James. The teams he was on, the teams he was playing, clearly that has something to do with it. But also, I think we have enough of a body of work now, Nick, a sample size of 1 1/3 seasons with the Mavericks to know that Kyrie can be a special player at any time, but he clearly has a knack for being a very special player in the biggest moments. So I can't look at that number and not feel like that there's something there. Again, there are other factors, there are other things that are part of it, of course, but I don't think it's just raw coincidence as well. There's Kyrie is a big moment, not afraid of the moment, head's in the right place, focuses in the right place at all times, and I think. I will go back to his comment after the game last night. I'm not, and maybe this gives you a window into why he plays well in these situations. I'm not thinking about being up 3-0. I'm thinking about we just have to go out and win another game. And I said this on our pod today. When you are in any kind of job, whether it's playing basketball or broadcasting basketball or hosting a podcast or whatever, if you're in a job of skill that requires concentration and focus, when do you start making mistakes? When you lose your concentration and your focus isn't on what it needs to be on. And I think we've learned in watching Kyrie up close and personal for a year and a half and seeing him in his career and previous stops that at this time of the year in particular, the concentration and focus is where it needs to be. And so, I think that probably has some contributing factor to why he has success in these particular situations.
The great Mark Followill, play-by-play for the Mavs, and also the Take That With You podcast. Here, I'll just do it one more time for you. Take That With You podcast. Go check it out.
Thank you.
And Mark Followill, thanks for joining us.
You got it, Nick. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Love the work that you do, and keep on keeping on, man.